Hello again, I'm Ernesto Juan from ZuDhan Productions, and today I welcome you to another episode of our series Traveling to Cuba Legally from the United States. Of course, there is a lot of interest in U.S. citizens to travel to Cuba. Many of them have been willing to travel to Cuba for the last 50 years. The United States has been imposing restrictions on U.S. citizens to travel to Cuba for many years. And finally, a couple of weeks ago, the Department of Transportation of the United States finally approved that some official airlines could fly, American airlines could fly to Cuba. Initially, there were only approvals to fly to several airports, but not including Havana. Last week, the Department of Transportation finally approved that 8 U.S. carriers, U.S. airlines could fly directly to Havana. I mean, there is direct flights. You don't have to fly like people used to do before through either Panama or Mexico or Nassau through third country routes. Nowadays, you can fly directly to Havana. I have here in front of me a story from the New York Times from the 7th of September. That is 4 days ago. And it says the headline is 8 U.S. airlines win tentative approval to fly to Havana. Tentative approval. It's interesting to know that the first paragraph of this story says that a fiercely contested battle among United States airlines to be the first to schedule flights to Havana, Cuba's capital, in more than 50 years is coming to a close. Fiercely contested battle. There's been 12 airlines fighting to get permission to fly to Cuba. 12. Only 8 were approved. It says then that 8 carriers, most with flights departing from the Miami and New York metropolitan areas, that is mostly from Miami, where I live, of course, where there is a big Cuban population or Cuban American population, and New York. Of course, New Jersey is very close to New York, and there is a big population of Cuban Americans living in New Jersey. Remember that these flights are only approved if you fall, that is, if you as an American citizen you fall under 12 categories approved by the U.S. government that will only give you the permission to travel to Cuba legally. So these 8 carriers received tentative approval. That is a tentative approval. Doesn't mean that right now you can just go online and book a flight and fly to Havana next week. Later on, I'm gonna go through. We're gonna go to one of the pages of, for example, American Airlines, and we are gonna see how you can book your flight. And then we are gonna see, or we're gonna hear the comments of American Airlines, a spokesperson who says that these flights, even though they have been approved to start as early as next September, are likely not to start until probably November. There is a lot of bureaucracy. There is a lot of things that still have to be taken care of. There's been appeals which are under analysis, and there's going to be a little bit of more fight for these airlines to win their battle to be able to fly directly to Havana and several other provinces in the country, in the island. So it says that they received tentative approval from the Transportation Department on Thursday to operate direct flights to Jose Marti International Airport, which is the main airport in Havana. It's divided into 5 different terminals. The terminal mostly used for flights coming from the United States is Terminal 2. Then we will see whether Havana has the potential to welcome so many different flights during the day. So they will operate direct flights to Jose Marti International Airport in Havana. 12 airlines had submitted requests for a combination of 60 flights a day. 60 flights a day, come on. Havana doesn't have potential to, it doesn't have the infrastructure to welcome 60 flights a day. One of my flights to Havana, say 6 months ago, there were only 2 planes on the tarmac. Only 2 planes. One plane arrived probably. I left Miami on the first flight which was at 7 o'clock in the morning. One flight left a few minutes before us. So when we got to Havana, there was already a plane on the tarmac. We had to wait for 2 hours to get the staircase to get off the plane, because the Havana terminal didn't have enough staircases for 2 planes. So are they going to have staircases for 60 flights a day? Anyways, 12 airlines had submitted requests for a combination of 60 flights a day, but only 20 daily routes were available on an arrangement between the two governments. The decision was made a year after the United States and Cuba reestablished diplomatic relations. The United States Department of Transportation announced last month that it had approved routes to 9 other Cuban cities. In another episode, we're going to see which are these other 9 cities. Today we're going to concentrate only on Havana, which is the capital, which is where everybody wants to go. But it delayed authorizing the Havana routes because of competition among the major airlines. The department awarded the routes to serve markets with substantial Cuban American populations and crucial aviation hub cities. Yesterday I read the news that Chicago was out of the picture. Chicago was not given a piece of the pie. You cannot fly from Chicago directly to Havana. You have to either go then to New York, or you have to go to Los Angeles, or you have to come down to Miami. Among the winners was American Airlines. Who else? American Airlines, which will operate 5 direct flights to Havana. That is 5 direct flights to Havana. 4 flights from Miami and 1 from Charlotte, North Carolina. That is, out of these 5 flights, 4 flights a day will come from here, from Miami International Airport, and 1 from Charlotte, North Carolina. American, which was approved for more flights than any other airline, had operated charter flights to Cuba for 25 years. It's true. I flew to Havana, say a few months ago, and I used an American Airlines flight. Their service is great. I mean, I have flown on different other charter planes, and one of them was the one that didn't have. Well, it's not their fault. It's true. It's not their fault. It was Cuba's fault that they didn't have a staircase for us to come down the plane. In Havana, you won't find like you find in any other airport in the United States or around the world, that there's a tube, there is a tunnel that you can use between the plane and the terminal. In Havana, you have to walk. If it's raining, be prepared to bring a raincoat or be prepared to bring an umbrella, because you're gonna get wet. So it says there, I carry on saying that Alaska Airlines is the only carrier that will fly to Havana directly from the West Coast. It will operate a once daily flight from Los Angeles. So you can fly from LA to Havana directly on Alaska Airlines. While American tourism to Cuba is still technically prohibited, the federal government in March relaxed travel restrictions to allow people-to-people educational trips without special permission from the government. Those trips must fall under one of 12 categories, like visiting family members or for humanitarian projects. In previous episodes, we analyzed with Orlando Consuegra from Togolor Travel these 12 categories. We divided in episode 2 and episode 3, we divided this analysis between the first 6 categories and the other 6 categories. It's true. The people-to-people category is one of the most widely used. Because you can drop anything in that bag. Like if you're gonna visit people because you want to help them, or because you want to know how they live, you want to live with them. If you are a musician and you want to go and play a concert in Cuba, if you are a filmmaker and you want to go and film part of your vlog. If you're a vlogger, if you're a YouTuber, you can just go to Cuba and do one of your vlogs from Havana. You are perfectly authorized to do that. So you're traveling to Cuba legally. If you want to film a vlog, if you want to film a music video, if you want to do shoot a film or anything related to professional trips, is also allowed. Now, who is keeping track of this? We are gonna see this later in another video. If somebody is watching you, if you have to report that you went to Cuba on a people-to-people basis, or on professional meetings, or visit family. Is anybody watching? So in another episode, we're gonna see whether there are people watching, if the immigration authorities will ask you questions upon your return from Havana. It says here later on that 6 direct flights will be offered from Miami each day. Remember, 4 of these flights are from American Airlines flights. So, and 3 flights from the New York metropolitan area. Delta Airlines and JetBlue Airways will each offer a daily flight from Kennedy International Airport, and United won a route from Newark Liberty International Airport. Other flights originate from Fort Lauderdale and Tampa, Florida, and Atlanta and Houston. Spirit Airlines and Southwest Airlines also won routes. Application from 4 small airlines: Silver Airways, Dynamic International Airways, Eastern Airlines, and Sun Country Airlines were not approved. These airlines were not approved. They cannot fly to Havana. They are still appealing, and there are still some answers to be heard from the U.S. Department of Transportation, and there will be, of course, there might be some arrangements to the routes. Maybe some of the routes will be included. Probably on other airports in the United States will also be included. That is, the airlines and other stakeholders have until July the 22nd, that is 10 days from today, to submit formal objections to the routes. And the Transportation Department plans to complete its decisions this summer. The first flights are expected to take off as early as September. They are expected to take off as early as September. Okay, let's stop here for now. In this episode, I only want to show you these 8 airlines that have been granted permission by the Department of Transportation to fly to Cuba. Remember that these are only tentative approvals. In our next episode, we are going to see if it's really true that you can book your flight today to Havana as early as September. See you then.